right, so today we're going to talk about hidden talents again. And I think I can see Martin's talent. Pay attention to how he responds to teachers. What is his talent? Take a minute to think about that, because I think the author is taking their time kind of stepping in some common themes to the way that Martin engages with educators that are supposed to give us a clue. Cheater on the phone after lunch. Cheater: hi, I can't talk long. Class starts in a minute. I just wanted to say hello. Mrs. Wu: are you studying hard? Cheater: yes, Mom. Mrs. Wu: your father and I will pick you up this weekend. Great. Hey, guess what? I met a new kid. Is he a nice boy? Yeah, well, sort of. I think he's okay. He likes to kid me, but he's not too mean. At least, not too mean. He seems pretty smart, too. Not as smart as I am, of course, but he isn't a dummy. Well, just be careful who you associate with. I will. How are you doing with your tests? I have to go. I need to get a good spot for science. Bye. I wonder what's going on there. This chapter is called Fun with Science. Mr. Briggs was waiting for us when we walked into science class. Today, he was wearing a Harvard sweatshirt with his jeans. Hey, a new face, he said. Come on in. Welcome. Glad to have you. He smiled, and it almost looked like he meant it. Torchy had already plunked down on the carpet next to Cheater. He took a piece of paper from his notebook and put it on the rug. I guess it was an assignment from last week. I was about to sit next to Torchy when I noticed the paper was on fire. I guess Mr. Briggs noticed too. He walked over and calmly stomped the paper, smothering the flame. Then he held out his hand. Come on, give me the matches. Torchy shook his head. I don't have no matches. He reached into his jeans and pulled his pockets inside out. A bunch of change went flying to the floor along with a half-dozen lighters. Mr. Briggs bent over and scooped up the lighters. Philip, if you keep denying that you have a problem, you'll never make any progress. But I don't have no problem, Torchy said as he gathered his coins. Mr. Briggs shook his head, then said, I'm not going to force you to face reality. Only you can make that decision, but you might want to think about the evidence. He walked to the front of the room and started the lesson. Torchy was right. Mr. Briggs was a pretty good teacher, and he didn't get in my face with all the new kid garbage, but I learned stuff, or not learned stuff, was never my problem. I didn't have any trouble with science or math or English. I just had trouble keeping my mouth shut sometimes. It wasn't really fair. Lots of other kids mouthed off, but I always seemed to get in the most trouble for it. My sister mouthed off sometimes, but she didn't get in trouble. Maybe it was because she was a girl. My mom always stood up for her, and Dad never got mad at her, but I didn't hold it against her. She was the only one in the family who didn't treat me like some kind of giant disappointment. So science class was fine. Mr. Briggs pulled equipment out of the closet while he talked. I noticed that there wasn't a whole lot of stuff, just a couple microscopes, some test tubes, and a small pile of assorted junk. He showed us several experiments we could do with ropes and pulleys, then let us play around on our own. The time went pretty quickly, except for one of the runts who had the misfortune to experience 30 seconds of pure terror. I think his name was Squibbly or something like that. Bloodbath wrapped a rope around Squibbly's throat and kind of lifted him up in the air, but he let go before Mr. Briggs noticed. I realized that Bloodbath was sort of like a human version of a stealth bomber. He could slip in, cause pain, and slip away without detection. As I was leaving the end of class, Mr. Briggs called me over to his desk. Martin, could I talk with you for a minute? Sure. I had no idea what he wanted, but he was a teacher, so he had the power to talk with me until my ears bled, if that's what made him happy. I've been looking over your records, and I'm a bit confused. Most of the students here are here because they have extremely serious problems in other schools. The entries in your files aren't very specific. He stopped talking and watched me. I knew that trick. He was waiting for me to start talking. The really good interviewers on TV do the same thing. They ask a question, then they just stop talking and wait. Even after they get an answer, they wait for more. Most people can't stand silence, so they blab all their secrets away. I really wasn't in the mood to spill my life story, so I just smiled and shrugged. Sure enough, he couldn't stand the silence either. Well, I just wanted you to know that I'm here if you ever have any problems, okay? Okie dokie, I said. Can I go now? Yes, but remember, I'm here to help you. He leaned forward and gave me a warm smile. I took a step away. Actually, I'll bet you're here because you couldn't get a job at some big fancy college or some important chemical company. I walked off. Halfway across the room, I started to feel like a real rat. Mr. Briggs had been nice to me, and the way I'd acted, I might as well have just kicked him. I turned around so I could say I was sorry, but he was staring out the window like his mind was a million miles away. I sprinted down the hall and caught up with Torchy, who was just catching up with Cheater. I wondered why Cheater hadn't rushed ahead for seats. Then I noticed Bloodbath strolling along farther up the hall. I guess Cheater didn't want to risk running past him. He hits me every time I get near him, Cheater said, following my gaze down the hall. I'm not surprised. I'd suspected Bloodbath might have a couple of favorite punching bags. What did Briggs want? Torchy asked. He wanted to let me know that I'm not really such a bad person. It was quite a relief to hear that. Guess I can pack my things and go home now. Really? Cheater asked. That's great. He grinned, then his smile faded. But you just got here. How come you get to leave? It's not fair. I shook my head. This kid was amazing. He'd believe anything. He was just too easy. Wait, I get it, Cheater said. You're kidding. Can't fool you, I told him. I looked at my schedule. History next. What's it like? Torchy grinned. Cheater grinned. What? I asked. You'll see, Torchy said. Form 937-C, Edgeview School. For official use only. New student preliminary evaluation form. Student name, Martin Anderson. Evaluation. To be honest, I'd like to shake him up. But maybe that's my problem, not his. I sense that there's something good inside him. Not deep inside and hidden where nobody will ever find it, just inside somewhere. I'd rather not be too hasty to judge him. Evaluator, Dale Briggs. Your history. Let's just say Ms. Crenshaw is big on class participation, Cheater told me. I found out what he meant the moment I walked into the room. The teacher was right inside the doorway handing out costumes. Hi, you must be the new boy, she said, shoving a white and fluffy bundle into my hands. This is a voluntary class. Anyone who doesn't want to attend can choose to go to a traditional lecture with Mr. Ludovico across the hall. I looked at my lump of fluff. It was a white wig. All I could manage to say was, huh? You get to be Thomas Jefferson today, Mrs. Crenshaw said, smiling, like she just told me I'd won the lottery. She handed another wig to Torchy. You're George Washington, she said. A puff of powder drifted between his hands. Then Miss Crenshaw thrust a folded piece of cloth towards Flitch, who grimaced and pulled away at first, but finally took it from her. Not Martha again, Flitch said, letting the dress flop open between his fists. Please, I hate being Martha. I was Martha twice last week. Can't I be Ben Franklin? Miss Crenshaw just kept smiling and said, now that's not a very helpful attitude. Every role is important. There are no small parts. I'm sure you don't want to let the others down, do you? Flitch looked around. Hey, would any of you feel let down if I didn't play Martha Washington? The poor kid. Once we saw how much he didn't want to play the part, there was no way we were going to help him get out of it. We're counting on you, Martha, Cheater said. Lucky, who had just walked in, said, every country needs a mother. It's your duty, Flitch. Others joined in. Flitch never had a chance. A kid might help another kid who fell into a river, and a kid might help another kid search for a lost baseball. But there isn't a kid I've ever met who will help another kid out of a humiliating situation. We just aren't built that way. So I put on the wig and tried to act like Thomas Jefferson. Not that I had a clue how to really do that. It was pretty much a wasted hour. We all walked around and talked about the revolution. I'm pretty sure I didn't learn anything except that wigs are uncomfortable. I noticed that the tough kids who'd been in my other classes weren't in history. Miss Crenshaw had said that there was a choice. I guess the thugs had decided they didn't want to wear costumes and wigs. As far as I was concerned, that was one good reason to stick with this class, no matter how crazy it seemed. All we had to do was walk around and make sure we used the vocabulary words the teacher had put on the blackboard. No trouble at all. Toward the end of the period, Miss Crenshaw asked us to sit down so we could discuss what we'd learned. I was just relaxing in my chair when somebody shouted at me, "Shut up! Just shut up!" I looked over my right. It was Lucky. He was glaring at me, but it was real spooky. I would have bet $1,000 that even though his eyes were pointed in my direction, he didn't see me. A hand tapped my shoulder. "Don't worry about it," Torchy said. "He does that sometimes." Nobody else seemed worried about it either. I turned away from Lucky. Sure enough, a minute later, when I glanced back, he seemed okay. At the end of the period, as I was handing in my wig, Miss Crenshaw patted me on the arm and said, "Well, Martin, did you enjoy our little class?" All I had to do was nod and say yes. That would have been fine. 3 letters, 1 syllable, and I'd be out of there. Instead, I said, "You must really have a desperate desire to be in the theater." I shook my head. "This sure ain't Broadway, but it's as close as you'll ever get." She looked like she wanted to hit me. Through gritted teeth, she said, "You don't have to participate. You can attend the lecture instead. Would you like to do that?" I shook my head. "No, thanks." She continued to glare at me. It seemed I'd gotten another teacher to leave my fan club. That wasn't fair. I hadn't really said anything all that bad. At this rate, I'd need to start using pencil and paper to keep track of who hated me. Though with my luck, Torchy would set my list on fire. "Does Lucky do that a lot?" I asked Torchy when we left the room. Torchy shrugged. "Not that much. You'll get used to it. He's really a good guy. Just make sure you don't make any comments about things being missing when he's around. He's really sensitive about that because he's always getting in trouble for stealing stuff." "I'll keep that in mind." I glanced back into the room. Lucky was in the corner, reaching into the wastebasket. I couldn't tell whether he was putting something in or taking something out. I guess it didn't matter either way. "Anyone ever get out of here?" I asked Torchy as we walked down the hall. "Kids drop out when they get old enough," he said, "or they get arrested and go to jail. That's only happened a couple of times when they were real bad fights. Principal Davis doesn't like to call the cops. You can graduate, of course, but that's no good because then you have to go to the alternative high school down in Danville, and that place is 10 times worse than here." "No. I mean, does anyone ever go back to regular school?" "There's the review," Torchy said. "What review?" I asked. "Didn't you read the handbook?" I thought about the charred paper in my wastebasket. I guess I couldn't blame Torchy. Even if he hadn't set it on fire, I'd already tossed the handbook out. "Tell me about it." "They get together at the end of your first month and discuss whether you should stay. After that, you're here for good." "They?" I asked. "Your teachers," Torchy said. "The ones who see you in class. It's not really fair. There were 4 fires the day I had my review. They blamed me for all 4. Can you believe that? I heard it was the quickest review in the history of our school." I was only half listening to Torchy. My mind was replaying my first meeting with each of my teachers. So far, I'd pretty much guaranteed they'd hate me. 1 month. Maybe if I just keep my mouth shut and did my work, I'd have a chance. There was only 1 class left for the day. I promised myself no matter what, I wouldn't make another teacher angry. It turned out to be a difficult promise to keep. Form 937-C, Edgeview School, for official use only. New student preliminary evaluation form. Student name, Martin Anderson. Evaluation, I love them all, of course. They need me, but this one might be an exception. Evaluator, Priscilla Nomad. Wow, he managed to upset Miss Nomad, who seemed so nice. We will read more next time. Thank you for joining me. I hope you think about this. What do you think his talent is? Bye.